understand the true value of your real estate property? My name is Mathew Owens, and welcome to the Masters of Real Estate YouTube channel. Today's video, I'm going to talk about all the ways to value your real estate property. So obviously, a lot of people understand the traditional ways of saying, hey, I'm going to go put it on the MLS, and I'm going to see what a willing buyer is willing to pay for that property to come out with the value of your property, right? And you typically take different comparables and see what's out there to understand that value. There's also another way to value it that most people don't actually fully look at, which is the value of that property to you based on the cash flow, based on the different metrics from the income side of things and the future growth side. So on one side, we have comping out of a property on the MLS or different comparables out there. And on the other side, you have the income method of valuation. So let's talk just briefly about that income method so that you fully understand what you're comparing it to. So you always want to look at your property and say, okay, what happens if I sell that property? How much money will I get out of that after taxes versus if I held that property based on the money that I would have gotten out of it? What am I making in cash flow and other benefits associated with that actual asset? So what you're going to be doing when you're looking at the income method of valuing your property is saying, okay, if I was going to rent this property out, minus management, minus vacancy allowance, minus property taxes, minus insurance, minus repairs and CapEx, and then minus your mortgage payment if you have it on there, how much monthly cash flow will it produce for you to hold on to that property? Okay. So you're looking at, if it makes you $10,000 a year in cash flow and you would have gotten out $100,000 of an equity, then you're making a 10% cash on cash return on investment with regard to the cash flow. But there are some other benefits to holding a property long term. One is the principal reduction on that loan. You always want to add that in to your return because your return on a hold is not just based off of the cash flow associated with it. You want to look at the return on investment for the principal reduction. You also have tax benefits, meaning the depreciation you get to take on that property every single year that goes against your taxes or reduces the taxable income associated with that investment in itself. So understanding the depreciation benefits associated with it. You also have the future cash flow. In an inflationary environment, you're going to have a slow, steady rise in rents. Over the last couple of years, we've had a massive rise in rents that have occurred, and there may be some volatility where rents actually lower too. Rents do lower sometimes, contrary to what people have thought over the last 10 years when we've had a massive bull run. Now, you're looking at that future long-term appreciation of or inflation of that rental income. And also, you also have to consider the inflation associated with the expenses on the property taxes and insurance going up or the repairs costs going up, those types of things as well. Usually the rental increase by a higher percentage than those expense increases, which then makes it cash flow better and better and better into the future. So being able to understand some of those metrics. Now, there could be a situation where rents drop and expenses rise, in which case you could have a lower cash flow in the future. So understanding where you're at in the market and what should be happening into the future is key in your investment decision. You also have future appreciation that you want to consider as well when you're investing in real estate, and being able to, look at that as well and saying long term, what happens with the appreciation or that inflation of the asset? Did you leverage that asset? In which case it's working, triple time for you, where if you leveraged it 75% loan to value or 70% loan to value, that inflation is actually decimating the debt at the same time. And so when you're determining whether you should sell or not, you also want to consider all of these long-term benefits versus what cash you would get out of it after taxes if you were able to sell that property. So great thing to look at if you're determining whether you're going to sell a property or hold a property. Now, looking at the actual comps on the property, there's multiple ways to comp out a property and understand what that value is, okay? You're going to start out with fully renovated market value comps that are out there on the market that you've seen that have sold, already sold, or are pending. Especially in a volatile market, it's really important to pay attention to the pending listings and listings that are that have sold within the last 3 months versus necessarily the last 6 months or 1 year. Appraisers can actually typically go up to around a mile away from the property, or if it's in a rural area, they'll go out a couple more miles away from the property, as well as they're looking at the last 3 to 6 months or the most recent comps first, and then saying what else exists on the market over the last 6 months or the last 12 months to support the value that they think it's worth across the board. Now, that is very subjective, right? So you want to be able to pull your own comp analysis to determine what you think it's worth as well. So you're going to be starting off with those market value comps, fully renovated properties that are out there that, you know, might look like yours, and you got to make some adjustments down for renovation quality and some other aspects associated with it, and properties that are not comparable to yours. So just like an appraiser makes adjustments, you have to make adjustments as well. So the first place you're going to look when you're looking at comps is you're going to look at the MLS, and you're going to try to pull comps from the MLS because it's the best place for the best data. Sometimes the MLS can be wrong, but you also want to go through and, you know, look at those. You want to look at the Redfin and Zillow comps. There's PropStream, there's title companies that you can pull comps from. There's a lot of different places that you can actually pull these comps from to be able to successfully compile a list of the most recent comps. And a lot of times I really like the MLS or Zillow or Redfin because they'll keep pictures on there of what that looked like. Now, you got to be careful. It can be very deceptive. Could be a lot of bad data out there. So this is just very subjective. This is you have to use some assumptions sometimes about, you know, a renovated property might sell for top dollar, but the pictures on Zillow look absolutely horrible, and you realize that's probably not the pictures of that property. So backing that up with an MLS comps, are trying to call the realtor involved that represented that listing and understand why that property sold for that price is key. You should be driving your comps to understand, is that neighborhood comparable to your neighborhood for your subject property as well, to look at those comps in detail and say, what are different about those comparables compared to my property as a whole, okay? So you're generally looking for around the same square footage of the property within about 20% or so. You don't want to have a super high price property that's 3,000 square feet. If your property is a 1,500 square foot house, that's really not a comparable, and you're going to get skewed numbers by doing that. So you want to be very careful, and you don't want to pick the top dollar comps out there in the market. You want to be a little bit more conservative. If you see a couple of comps hitting way higher numbers, and then, you know, a bunch of other comps in another general range, I would definitely use the general range comps instead of those top dollars, because there could be certain things about those properties that make it sell for that high of a dollar figure. Maybe it's on a lake, maybe it's you know, big giant lot or something like that, or the layout is really good, or the construction is done really, really well, or it has a massive basement or something that's not included in the square footage or something along those lines. So there's a lot of adjustments that you want to make. So the first adjustment you're going to make is for square footage. So normally an appraiser is going to go out and say, hey, this comp is a 1,700 square foot house, and the property that I'm looking at is a 1,500 square foot house. Let me make a 200 square foot adjustment to that based on what they believe a proper adjustment could be. In the Midwest, it could be anywhere from $30 to $50 or $100 a square foot. In California, maybe much higher for a per square foot adjustment. Most appraisers are not going to give you the full cost per square foot or sales price per square foot on those adjustments, whether it's up or down. They're just, if your property's selling for $450 a square foot or something like that, they're not going to go and say, hey, you're $200 square feet times $450 a square foot gives you that reduction. They're going to reduce that. Maybe it'll be $100 a square feet. And you want to talk to appraisers in your area to determine what their typical adjustments are for square footages. It's always a great idea after an appraisal to sit down with your appraiser and go over their adjustments so you understand what they're thinking based on their expertise in the market, not questioning them, but just understanding for your own knowledge so that you don't make a mistake in the future and you know what is typical for the area. And you want to talk to multiple appraisers because those appraisers have different opinions and they do different adjustments. Some of the other things are, does it have an additional bedroom or additional bathroom or a basement? Does it have certain amenities around the area? All of these types of things. Does it have a pool? Does it have a deck? Does it have, does it have a weird layout, or is it on a major street or a big lot or something like that? All of these things can be adjustments. So you start out with your market value comp of what that other property sold for, and you're adjusting and adjusting and adjusting, or adjusting up depending on what your property has versus the comp property, so that you can get a adjusted value. And you're going to do that with every single comp that you find, and then you're going to pick a value that you think is most accurate here, that you can actually count on by utilizing the best comps, the ones that are the closest to your property or have the closest layout, the least amount of adjustments, that look very similar to yours, and you're going to put the most weight to those. Remember, it's very subjective. This is an art. It's not a science. But you can get it as scientific as you possibly can by breaking these things down and understanding what appraisers do and how those adjustments work across the board. I think it's absolutely key here to be able to, get that right value and realize that it's just an estimate. It's not necessarily what a buyer is willing to pay for that property in general. So in addition to that, you really need to understand the renovation adjustments. So if your property is unrenovated and you're saying, hey, I'm trying to compare it to a fully renovated property, you not only have to make all of your normal adjustments that we just went over, but you have to reduce it by not just the renovation cost as well to get it to that top shape, but an additional amount on top of that for profit for the person that's going to renovate it. You don't want to go through and say you have a property that's worth $100,000 and the renovation is $25,000. You are not going to go and get $75,000 for that property. You have interest costs and holding costs during construction that have to be considered. You also have their profit that needs to be considered as well, so that way you can say, hey, this is what a person will pay for my property in its current condition. You're going to get a slight additional bump down if your property needs a full renovation on that deal, so that person that's buying it can actually improve it and get some built-in equity and get some profit for the extra effort to do that. Now, you might find some homeowners that are willing to do the work and pay that dollar figure for it anyways. And so they're finding other ways to pay more for a property by doing the work themselves, or, that type of strategy. But at the end of the day, you shouldn't expect that, right? That person that's improving that $100,000 property might want to go through and say, hey, you know what? I need that deal for $60,000 instead of $75,000 because I got to make that margin, and I only want to be in it for $90,000 versus the $100,000 value to make sure that I got some built-in equity for all of the workload that goes into that. So considering these factors is very, very key. All the adjustments, pulling your comps and being very strategic about it, making a list of those comps, and then an adjustment to each one of those, and coming up with your values based on those adjustments is absolutely key when you're comping out your property for sale. So realize that's how the realtors do it. That's how the realtors are doing it, as well as the appraisers, so that way you understand where they're coming up with their numbers. You're not surprised when they come out with a number out of the blue that you weren't expecting. So I hope this helped. If you guys like this content, please like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and I'll do everything I can to bring out tons of great content for you guys to learn as much as possible about real estate. If you feel this information is valuable, reach out anytime you want, and we can talk about real estate in general or see how we can help you guys. Talk to you soon.